And tonight I'm going to talk specifically about how to talk politics with your closest family on the holidays, especially those with whom you disagree. And I know what you're probably thinking. Gosh, it would have been better if you'd recorded this 1 week earlier, before Thanksgiving. But first of all, we still have the Christmas holiday coming up, and secondly, having just had Thanksgiving with my family, and as you did as well, it probably has given you at least something to think about, how it went, what could have been done better, and so forth. So even though this is after Thanksgiving, we still have a big holiday season coming up, so there'll be more opportunities to talk about politics with your close family, and maybe to put some lessons into practice here. Now, this is only my third YouTube video, and I've decided I think the theme of this channel is going to be the fake news, the mass media. And tonight's episode isn't going to be so much about them, but we are going to look at some of the articles that appeared about this very subject in the major media. And we're going to laugh at them. We're going to point out all the ridiculous ideas and recommendations they have and talk about how this is exactly what not to do. And actually, most of the articles I looked at were really talking about how to avoid talking politics with your family. And I understand where that could be coming from with, emotions run high when we're talking about politics. And of course, that often is the case around the holidays with all kinds of other things. And I've had family holidays that have been extremely pleasant and sometimes acrimonious, and you got to make the best with whatever the situation is. And certainly, I think if you're going to be talking politics and you want to get into difficult issues, one of the first important things to do is to avoid having conflict elsewhere and really go out of your way to be good to everybody, to help everyone have a nice holiday. And if there's other people out there that really want to make trouble, you just want to do the best you can to kind of bring the situation down. But I do think it is important that we do talk about politics, even with those we disagree. And this is not typically something that a political consultant would actually recommend. Typically our advice is, most people's minds are made up. There's some percentage of voters in the middle, what we call the swing voters, but other people are going to be lifelong Democrats or lifelong Republicans, and having a conversation or two is not going to change that. But you want to do the best that you can, because every little bit might make a little bit of a difference out there. And it's important to engage people that don't always see things your way too. It can be good for everybody. So I think it's something we do want to talk about here. So before we go into some of the details, let's first take a look at some of the stories that came out right around Thanksgiving. But first, since we're going to be talking about fake news here, just wanted to share this little bit of holiday cheer with you. This is the story from Breitbart that Newsweek has fired the journalist that posted this article, saying that what Trump did for his Thanksgiving was tweeting and golfing. And of course, what Trump actually did over Thanksgiving was he actually visited the troops in Afghanistan. And as Secret Service member, former Secret Service Dan Bongino, who organized one of these trips for President Barack Obama, pointed out, these are always actually very difficult, logistically complicated. It's not just a simple publicity stunt to go out to Afghanistan under any circumstances. It really is a big deal. And so the story was, here we go, Newsweek has fired the so-called journalist, who was responsible for the false story that President Donald Trump spent Thanksgiving tweeting and golfing, when in fact the president was secretly traveling to Afghanistan to surprise U.S. troops for the holiday. Newsweek told Breitbart News in a statement that the magazine has moved away from knee-jerk political snarkiness to focus on real reporting. Well, let's hope so. That'd be great. It's a little bit late now. Newsweek is no longer even in print, but here's what happened. So Jessica Kwong published an article entitled, "How was Trump spending Thanksgiving? Tweeting, golfing, and more." The problem with this story is that it didn't contain reporting, said Newsweek spokesman into Breitbart News in a statement. It was published before Thanksgiving was over, and we're trying to pull Newsweek away from that into real reporting. Well, good for them. Now, of course, they might have actually not ran the story in the first place. I mean, every story has at least two people, the reporter and the editor, that actually published it. And, oftentimes it's not actually the reporter that picks the title of the story, the clickbait. It's a business decision. They want to get eyes on the article. So who knows if the reporter wasn't just thrown under the bus. I don't know. But they did confirm to Breitbart that this journalist was terminated specifically for the inaccurate Thanksgiving story about President Trump. So, for all the criticism we're going to be having on this channel about the mass media, there is at least this nice silver lining about at least once a publication coming back and saying, you know what, maybe we are getting a little bit out of control here. Maybe we should be reporting news and not reporting what they call knee-jerk political snarkiness. And, stories like this, I mean, snark is one word for it, but what's really going on here is the idea of there's a death by 1,000 paper cuts of maligning President Trump in one way or the other. And in this case, the story was going to be that Trump on Thanksgiving was busy just being a douchebag and tweeting snark and then and golfing rather than taking care of the American people and what have you. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. So it's nice to see at least one publication taking some responsibility for what it does. But let's look at some of the other articles that specifically went into how to, in this article, shut down your Trump-supporting family member at Thanksgiving dinner. This is by someone named Merrick von Rennenkampf, an opinion contributor for The Hill. Now, before we even get into the substance of the article, let's just look at this headline here. How to shut down your Trump-supporting family member at Thanksgiving dinner. Is this really the way that a responsible publication wants their readers to approach their family on the Thanksgiving holiday? How are you going to shut down your Trump-supporting Thanksgiving members? Shut them down. How can you humiliate them? How can you show them that you're right and they're wrong? And I don't know. Again, maybe the opinion contributor Merrick von Rennenkampf actually penned that headline, or maybe that came to be the headline thanks to an editor. I don't know which is worse. Either you've got this opinion out there typing furiously at his keyboard, how to shut down your Thanksgiving, how to shut down your family members at Thanksgiving, or the responsible editor for the publication came up with that headline either just as a callous way to get clicks, and boy, they got a decent number of shares on this article, 6,300 shares, or just out of complete disregard and neglect for what kind of reaction stories or headlines like this, attitudes like this that they're putting out there are actually putting into the public. So, who is Merrick von Rennenkampf? Let's see. Go down to the bottom here. Boy, this is a long explainer here. Who's going to follow all this? Okay, here we go. Merrick von Rennenkampf served as an analyst with the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of International Security and Nonproliferation, as well as an Obama administration appointee to the U.S. Department of Defense. Okay, so Washington Swamp, at least during the Obama era, maybe earlier before that, who knows. But either way, this is some deep stater, and this is his or her, I don't know, Merrick. This is Merrick's idea for how you're going to talk to your family on the holiday. And boy, it just goes on and on and on. Starts out here. Today, hundreds of millions of Americans will sit down with close friends and family over heaping portions of turkey, blah, blah, blah. Okay, in a country bitterly divided over the Trump presidency and his looming impeachment, heated arguments will begin. Tempers and passions are likely to flare, but they shouldn't. Well, this is actually correct. That much is true. We don't want tempers and passions to flare. They shouldn't need to. But let's see what his or her ideas are for how to have this productive discussion to shut down your family members here. Political discussion should not be about left or right, Democrat versus Republican. Instead, they should be about what is objectively right or wrong for the country. That's true, too. Although, in this case, this may just be window dressing for the partisan hackery that's to follow. But yes, it should not be about left versus right. That is correct. But to say that when you're about to roll out a whole bunch of talking points for the one party side is a little bit disingenuous. The facts are simply not on Trump's side. A few discussion points from the perspective of a political independent. Yes, sure you are, buddy. These key topics will follow. So we start with the economy. And this goes on for paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. Look at all the links in this. Link after link after link after link after link. It just goes on and on and on. Are you going to be able to persuade any member of your family with a galaxy of citations that they're not going to look up? No, of course not. That's not the way it works at all. This is something where if you bring up any, I mean, we're talking about the economy here. Good luck telling somebody who's making more money, who's got a new and better job, oh, yeah, well, the economy is actually really terrible right now. And of course, these are all statistics that can be easily manipulated. I'm not going to go through and try to break down every single one of these citations. It would take forever and it would be completely pointless. This is absolutely not the way to make any kind of cogent argument to somebody over the dinner table. So anyway, so we go through the economy here. Let's see what else they got. Healthcare. Again, this is a divisive topic that Americans have their own personal background on. For many people, Obamacare was absolutely disastrous for them. They got thrown off of their health insurance. Rates went high. They lost their choice of their doctor. And some others, a smaller minority that were not covered previously, got some coverage. But again, they're trying to make arguments from statistics to go against people's personal experience. That's a losing argument. And by the way, I just got back from my Thanksgiving holiday with my family, and I was raised in a liberal family. Most of my family is lifelong Democrats, and we've had our Thanksgiving discussion, and nobody brought up the economy. Nobody brought up health care. These are not winning issues for the Democrats. I don't know why even from a Democrat side they would bring these up. Immigration. Deportations are lower under the Trump administration compared in the same period to the Obama administration. First of all, that's a very, very short talking point they have on immigration. I wonder why that would be. I wonder why their Democrats just don't have very many arrows in their rhetorical quiver on immigration policy. And again, this is, if it's even true at all, it's a cherry-picked statistic. It doesn't prove anything. There's no question which side of the spectrum is on which side on immigration. What is this argument even supposed to serve? Deportations are far lower under the Trump administration compared to the same period during the Obama administration. Okay, so does that mean what? That Trump is failing in his campaign promises and he should be deporting more? Is that what your argument is? If your family member came to you and said, as a Democrat, remember this guy is, as he says, he's nonpartisan, but every single point in here is to attack Trump. Immigration deportations are far lower under the Trump administration compared to the same period. If your liberal family member says that to you, your response is, so are you grateful for Trump for reducing deportations then? Is that right? Oh, no, I think we should, I think he still wants to deport anybody. Okay, well then, it's a circular argument. It doesn't get anywhere. So that's all they've got in immigration, foreign policy. And this is, again, some of these citations are tenuous at best. There's one here someplace calling Trump the laughing stock. Here we go. Here it is about halfway down there. It should come as no wonder that America is the laughing stock of the world. Citation, at a UN conference, Trump said he was the greatest president ever, and they laughed at him. That doesn't prove anything about foreign policy. Here's a foreign policy argument for you. What hasn't happened in the Trump administration? Haven't had any new major wars, didn't invade any Middle Eastern countries, no Iraq invasion, no Benghazi, no overthrow of Gaddafi and destabilizing Libya. And by all accounts, we have had fewer troop casualties than we ever had in the Obama and Bush administration. The president's clearly doing everything in his power to start bringing troops home and been fighting the Washington establishment from the get-go on that. So I don't know why Democrats would ever want to bring up foreign policy. And then again, I don't know why they'd ever want to bring up impeachment either. This is another subject that strangely didn't come up all that much. It came up a little bit, but boy, Democrats have a tough problem trying to make the best out of the impeachment hearings. We'll talk about that in more depth in a moment here. And lastly, identity politics. What is even the point of this? Trump has railed against political correctness. Good for him. But Senator Bernie Sanders, Buttigieg, Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang have all spoken against the corrosive effects of identity politics and political correctness run amok. Yeah, they should. Although some of these people, Buttigieg in particular and Bernie Sanders, are the very peddlers of identity politics, so I don't know what their point is on that. And then perhaps most importantly, this is his conclusion. Actually, there's no real conclusion to this. It just kind of peters out at the end here. Perhaps most importantly, President Barack Obama's forceful rejections of woke culture and ideological purity should be a wake-up call to the left. Oh, here's where he's getting nonpartisan. Nonpartisan. So yeah, that's your advice, liberals. Don't talk about identity politics. Smart. What's our side going to do? Talk about identity politics. Talk about which side is purveying that. We'll talk about more in a little bit about what to do. but let's bring up at least another one about what not to do. Oh, real quick, this one PolitiFact story, and of course, this is the same kind of thing. How to fact check your family at the Thanksgiving dinner table. Good luck. This is not how people think. It's not how people respond. This is just so tone deaf. This is PolitiFact, who, of course, their business is spinning our articles in Democrats' favor, picking apart anything that a conservative publication publishes, and defending anything that a liberal publication publishes. Whatever. But I couldn't help but get a laugh at this story. This is from Breitbart, quoting tweets from Rob Reiner, spreading the "How to Talk Impeachment This Thanksgiving" guide from the people pushing for impeachment. So here's what Rob Reiner tweeted. If somebody in your family wants to make Thanksgiving dinner about defending Trump's high crimes, here's how you can be prepared. These are the 4 key arguments in the case for impeachment and removal. Be ready before you sit. Okay. So they have this short one here. And these are the most easily rebutted points out there. Trump pushed Ukraine to interfere in our 2020 elections. No, he didn't. How did he do that? Let's see if they get it in the bigger one. He used military aid to bribe Ukraine to dig up dirt on a political opponent. No, this is patently false. He didn't bribe Ukraine in any way, shape, or form, and it wasn't to dig up dirt on a political opponent. It was to investigate actual crimes. That's a huge distinction. Then he tried to cover it up. No, he didn't. He actually published the transcript of that call for everyone to see, because and as it shows, it exonerated him. No one is above the law. No, Joe Biden is not above the law. End of story. This one doesn't have anything more. How to talk impeachment turkey this Thanksgiving, because you know your Uncle Fred is going to bring it up. Uncle Fred, huh? Uncle Fred. That's how these people take all Trump supporters. This is why I think it's important to talk about these things, because that's the attitude that they want. That's the perception they want to be spreading. Oh, it's Uncle Fred. Uncle Fred. Trump, I love my president. Woohoo! That's all that we think about. Sure. No, I think most of the articles that were talking about how you can avoid talking politics on Thanksgiving are probably the best ones for the Democrats on this, especially when it comes to impeachment. But so this is what Rob Reiner would have you talk about on Thanksgiving. Talk about impeachment. Yeah, that'll go over real well with your family, I'm sure. Okay, so let's talk about how you can actually have a productive conversation with your family on Thanksgiving. Let me close out of this and do that. Let's see here. All right, I made a couple of notes here. If you're going to talk to your family members about politics on Thanksgiving, and again, start by being as diplomatic as you can in every other way. You know, always be helpful, always be deferential, conciliatory on personal issues. Don't be the one that starts personal conflict over anything. Don't argue about who's paying for the liquor, et cetera, et cetera. When you do get into talking about politics, first rule I would say is don't aim directly at their shields. People have had their whole lives to decide where they fall on certain issues, and you're not going to change anybody's core beliefs, not with one conversation, not with many. And remember, the media has prepped their targets for your talking points. There's a perception about what a Trump supporter would say about X, Y, or Z. So you don't want to say what they're going to expect you to say. So you don't want to just be repeating the things that you hear on Rush Limbaugh or Breitbart or anything like that. What you want to do is, and this is actually from one of the 7 habits of effective people, you seek to understand, then to be understood. It's about them. It's not about you. And you are not going to have the same policy priorities as they are. So, if their major issue is, say, I don't know, abortion or something, and your major issue is gun rights, you're not going to make any headway talking about gun rights. Democrats have very different ideas about the various candidates. There are Bernie supporters and Warren supporters who are very different from Buttigieg and Bloomberg supporters. I don't know if there's any Bloomberg supporters out there yet. We haven't seen any polls yet. Well, Judge Judy supports him, so there's her. But Democrats have very different tastes in how their candidates are messaging, and they have different priorities about the different issues. So, you want to start by listening, and you want to look for common ground. Let them tell you what's on their mind first. And you may get some indication that there's some issue where they're not on the Democrat reservation on. There's certain issues that not every Democrat shares. Now, things like, Democrats tend to be very pro-environment, but not every Democrat thinks we should ban fossil fuels. Some of them really do think about the consequences of energy being scarce and expensive and who gets hurt the most by that. It's regressive. High gas prices are regressive. A lot of Democrats don't believe that we should have reparations, as Elizabeth Warren, I think Bernie Sanders too, both came out in support of. Not every Democrat voter is going along with the party line on transgender children and saying that we should be condoning and subsidizing gender reassignment surgery for minor children. So there's issues where you might be able to find common ground with, and that's extremely important. Liberals, generally speaking, are not very big on military adventurism. They don't like military in general. In many cases, they often oppose war. They were opposed to war during the Bush era, certainly, and some of them might still remember that. So the fact that Trump has kept us out of war is a great talking point. That's an important thing. So the most important thing a president can do is resist the temptation in Washington to go to war. There's been a big shift in recent years on the topic of free speech. And liberals, the older liberals in particular, remember when free speech laws protected them from oppression from the right. And now the sides have kind of changed. Now, especially on college campuses, there's a big push on the left to shut down free speech, to silence groups that they don't agree with. And this is an issue that is appealing to older voters, that there's a real concern for the condition of free speech in our country when it's being shut down under the guise of hate crimes laws and red flag laws and what have you. Now, again, if it's not a pro-gun liberal you're talking to, the red flag issue might be a bridge too far for them. But you could talk about how important it is that we protect free speech on college campuses and how that's being shut down in so many ways. Hush, Dante. Shh. I'm podcasting. Some other things you might find common ground on is that Trump is a populist. He's totally opposed to the neocons. Nobody likes Bill Kristol. And then even what libertarians will call the cosmotarian wing of the libertarian wing, the Charles Kochs and what have you. Democrats for many years railed against the Koch brothers for their influence on politics, but now on immigration, they're very much on the side of the Koch brothers. So, you might find some kind of common ground there. One of the things to point out is even as recently as 2015, Bernie Sanders categorized open borders as a Koch brothers proposal and said, no, we should be taking care of American workers. That's a position that goes all the way back to Cesar Chavez. He said, we don't want farm workers being displaced by imported third world labor. We care about the American farmers. So there may be some memory of that. And speaking of Bernie Sanders flip-flopping on immigration, nobody likes a flip-flopper. That's always a fun issue to highlight, is when Democrats completely change their views, just to conform with the current election patterns and demographics and the things that they've done in their past that they no longer agree with. And then whether that was Bernie Sanders on immigration, or Bernie Sanders on gun rights, or Kamala Harris on drug policy, and whether or not she smoked pot in college or after college, or I don't know. I don't know when she listened to Snoop Dogg when she was high. Not before he wrote his songs, which was when she was in college. Maybe it was when she was working for the DA. But I digress. Most Americans, even liberals, don't hate the police. And they don't like seeing the police demonized and vilified. And, they might say, well, we don't like necessarily Trump's border policy, but we don't think we should shut down ICE. They do have certain important roles in protecting us from human traffickers and drug smugglers. So there's that. And I think a lot of Americans, even of the liberal persuasion, are not fully on board with the left's war on American history, which, of course, is in place all year. It happens in Christmas time. It happens in Thanksgiving when, certain liberal outlets will call it a celebration of genocide, which is not true, by the way. Look it up. I mean, I could post links, but no, Thanksgiving was, and there's contemporaneous history from the founders about this. The first Thanksgiving address of George Washington. Thanksgiving was very much about the peace that they made with the Indians at the time, particularly. I think it was, who was it? It was, dang. I know the Narragansett were one of the Indians that the Indians that we befriended were very much afraid of being terrorized by. But no, Thanksgiving was absolutely not a celebration of genocide any more than Christopher Columbus's voyage was about conquering the Native Americans, the Native American Indians. And more broadly speaking, the general hatred of America that comes out of many parts of the left for our history. We love our country, and the history is what got it here. It's not a history of destroying the American Indians and committing genocide around the world. No, it's preventing genocide around the world, spreading prosperity, and being a leader in so many things, in freedom and democracy and technology and culture and so much else. We have a lot to be grateful for, and it's our history that got us there. So, as you're talking to people, you really want to look for those opportunities to find common ground and talk about the things that bring us together. And of course, there are going to be times when you have to argue with people, but you can argue without being argumentative. It's really not a good idea to take on a dispute head on unless it's something that you can really back up verbally. It's not, you cannot just say, well, your statistics are this and my statistics are that. It's not going to work. If their beliefs come from the research that they have taken up and decided to agree with, then you throw in counterfacts at them, it's not going to work. They're not going to read the books that you ask them to read. They're not going to watch the DVDs you ask them to watch. It doesn't work that way. There are a couple of exceptions. I do want to talk about one thing. This came up at Thanksgiving, talking to a family member of mine about she mentioned the two things that she just really doesn't like Donald Trump she hates him as a person. Maybe she shouldn't say hate, but she really dislikes Donald Trump as a person. And she brought up two of the issues that were from the 2016 campaign, which are, of course, the New York Times reporter. Remember I don't remember, and that was taken throughout the media as Trump mocks a disabled reporter. And then there was the other one, the Access Hollywood story. And it's interesting that nearly 4 years later, it's still these same stories that are the ones that are on people's minds. And I don't mean to talk about just her. This is something that Democrats still talk about to this day. And it's interesting to me that after 3 years of Trump being in office, this is still what they lead with. And that begs the question, well, it's funny how things like that haven't actually happened since Trump was president. But these are two myths that I think really are important to debunk. And let's get to them in order. The first one is the story about Trump mocking a disabled reporter. Now, the question I would have for someone that brings up this story is, how do you think Trump knew that reporter was disabled? Do you remember what the circumstances were surrounding that? Why was Trump making fun of this reporter? Just because he was disabled for no other reason? No. And this is the opportunity to share the story about what actually happened. Now, the New York Times reporter in question was caught in a corner on a statement that Trump had made in the media that the media was saying was not true. It was when Trump had made the claim that he had seen in the news that Muslims were dancing on 9/11, happy that the attacks had occurred, and the media said no, he completely made this up. It never happened. That never happened at all. And Trump said yes, it did. In fact, there was this story. It was in the New York Times, and he quoted it. And it was the story from this reporter, the one who was disabled. And remember, you saw the clips of him saying, "Oh, I don't remember. Oh, I don't remember." That was because he was saying he didn't remember filing that report that Trump had cited. He was disputing the veracity of Trump's claims. Trump wasn't attacking him for being disabled. He was attacking him for not being able to remember his own story. And again, you can reinforce, think about this. Trump has said he didn't know the reporter was disabled. How would he? How would he know? How would Trump know from a of the thousands of reporters out there? How would anyone assume that he knows of all of them by name and what their physical appearance is and any disabilities they might have? That is not a credible story. That is a perfect example of the media systematically misleading the public, and that's a pernicious one that has remained true to this day. And then, of course, there's the Access Hollywood tape, and this one you may simply never be able to win on, because women in particular said it's just so vulgar. It is absolutely unconscionable. You can't come at them and say, well, that was just locker room talk. That's not going to fly. What you might point out, and again, even this one may not work, but the fact again is that context matters, and he wasn't talking about women in general. He was talking about Hollywood type women, the people who are climbers on the social ladder. And when he says, you could just grab them by the, what he was really doing was making a comment about how shallow they are. And again, it was a comment made privately. It was never intended to be plastered before the American public. So to hold him to that is a little bit unfair. The question is if he still actually talks that way. Unfortunately, the media have made up so many stories from unnamed White House sources that Trump still speaks crudely in office. But I would say go to the actual things that Trump says that you can watch. The State of the Union addresses, which were all beautiful. Any address. He's made many, many, many news conferences, proclamations, declarations, speeches, and what have you. And yeah, sometimes he grandstands a little bit, but that's his style. It's a style that works for him. It's always good when you can to show the people how they're being misled. This is one of the number one tips in campaigns, actually, is show the voters how the other side is misleading them on whatever the issue that it is. People respond very well to being shown how they are being misled, because people don't like to be misled. They view it as a breach of their trust. So wherever there's the opportunity to show the people how they're being misled by the media or by the Democrats, that's a great opportunity for you. Let me give you an example of one story that was big about a year or so, actually more recently than a year or so ago. The accusation that the illegal immigrant detention facilities are, in the words of AOC, concentration camps. And this is all part of the narrative about what an evil guy Trump is. And what some conservatives have attempted to do to deflect that is to point out that actually those conditions had been unchanged from the Obama administration. This stuff all went on in those days. This defense will not work on its own. In fact, the liberals have been inoculated recently to ascribe this to what they call whataboutism, which this is an example of. So you say, if the Democrat says Trump is being cruel to children in these detention centers, and you say, well, what about Obama? He did that. They say, well, you're deflecting from the original point. Now, the problem is with whataboutism, what that essentially is it's defending hypocrisy. Because we're making an important point here. Yeah, Obama did this. You only now care about it. The media only now cares about it because Trump is president. When they say what they call whataboutism is actually standing up to hypocrisy and saying you can't have a double standard here. But this line of argumentation is not going to work. It will not work because they will stick by that you are deflecting from what their original point was. What you have to do is walk through the logic problems with the speaker. You say, well, did Trump create this policy? Now, that's a different way of saying the same thing, because they may have to admit then that this policy was actually pre-existing under Barack Obama. But you say, well, if this was going on under the Obama administration, why were there no whistleblowers then? And of course, the reason is because the actual immigrations and customs and enforcement are good. They're good people, and they're doing the best they can with their resources. And when you arrest people for being in the country illegally, it's grossly irresponsible to keep children locked up with adults who may be criminals, may be sex traffickers, and so forth. But you can't just say Obama did it also. You want to take people through the problems with the logic that can be picked apart. One of the best techniques is to always lead with questions. Because, people generally are, they don't think, I don't want to say that people don't think rationally, but they have a view, and it's a psychological investment. People make decisions based on their emotions, and then they come up with the rational basis for it. So rather than attacking a rational basis for someone having a position, you want to lead them to questioning it. For example, a great question is, can you or can anybody think of one thing Congress has done all year other than attempt to impeach Trump? Since the Democrats came into power, have they done anything whatsoever? And I promise you, almost nobody can name a single thing. I can't name a single thing, and I work in politics. And now, personally, I don't like the ends justify the means mentality. And one of the things I've never liked is when people say, "This is a do-nothing Congress," because I like it when Congress does nothing. It means they're probably refraining from doing bad things, although they actually probably aren't doing that. They probably are doing bad things. We just don't hear about them in the media. So it's a good rhetorical point, but I wouldn't lead to say, the problem is when Democrats are in power, Congress doesn't do anything. What I'd prefer to say is this has become such a complete circus that we've lost sight of what Congress is actually doing. There's no debate about anything. We don't even know what Congress is up to, and that's unhealthy. That's dangerous. It's self-serving that Congress, which is pushing impeachment, is also hiding from the voters what they've been actually pushing, what legislation they've been what legislation they've been introducing. Another good leading question, if we're talking about impeachment, and again, impeachment's a subject that'll probably come up. Do you really think there's nothing wrong with what the Bidens did in Ukraine? And this is damning because the evidence is on video. I mean, you can quote Joe Biden. He said, "I told them you better stop this prosecution or you're not getting the $1 billion. And son of a bee, within hours, they dropped the prosecution. They fired the prosecutor. Those were his words. They're on tape. And how amazing is it that they're attempting to impeach Trump for corruption for the very thing that we have hard evidence that Joe and Hunter Biden actually did? It's amazing. Another interesting question on impeachment. Don't people have the right to face their accusers? Do y'all remember when Valerie Plame was outed as a CIA agent? Do you remember one media source withholding her name, trying to keep that from the news? No, there wasn't one. Where did this standard come about that someone can accuse the president of wrongdoing and the media systematically refuses to report his name? There's no journalistic standard on that whatsoever. Nothing. And in general, regarding a number of issues, a great question always is, whenever it comes to, we're embarrassing our allies, we're hurting our allies in Ukraine, shouldn't the president be putting the American people first, second, and third? Isn't that his sworn duty? If you want to care about the welfare of a foreign country, that's fine. You can contribute your money to that country. But the president has a duty to the American people, and it's our tax dollars that are going overseas. That's a great unifying talking point. Americans hate that we give all these countries foreign aid, which typically is for some kind of quid pro quo, in some kind of way that benefits our country, but not necessarily, and it often actually doesn't. Another important thing, and this goes back to those articles we looked at earlier, is it's always best to discuss things in terms of values, not in terms of utility. People react to arguments of right and wrong, not facts and figures. So if you're taking maybe a tricky subject like a minimum wage, Democrats will have their economists that say, minimum wage is a good thing because it raises wages, and Republicans will have their economists say, no, it's a terrible thing because it outlaws jobs, and there's people whose income's going to go down to zero. There's additional problems, but the point is, people don't react to economic arguments, especially when you can find an economic argument on both sides of any issue at all. But they might react to ideas of right and wrong. It's morally wrong to criminalize the contract that an American worker has with his employer that says the job arrangement that you have is now no longer legal. That puts his job at risk. So you don't need facts and figures to make that argument. And always be talking about issues uh, in terms of our own family's future, not in terms of winning and losing on election day. People care about the future of the country. They care about whether or not their family members will be employed. These are the things to stick on. And again, the best argument for anything relating to the economy is, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Because for most people, that answer is yes, we are. You see that in the record low unemployment rates. And I think it's always a great argument to talk about the division of the divisiveness of politics and where did that exactly come from? Because you hear President Trump talking about, it talks about American pride and the importance of our country being unified, putting America first. The divisiveness is coming from the media. It's not coming from Trump. It's coming from their relentless attack on him. That's an important thing to underscore, is that our country's being divided. And it's not by Donald Trump. It's being divided by the media. It's being divided by the political class. That's another thing, Feel free to always throw the political establishment under the bus. I won't be offended. Most people will agree, in liberals and liberal states will complain to you endlessly about how dysfunctional the politicians in their own state are, even where Democrats have total control. So there's always opportunities there. And then finally talking about going on offense. Not everything needs to be about Trump. Don't let the other Democrat candidates get away with being unquestioned about what they're talking about on the national stage, with like the endless pandering they had for the LGBT movement at their so-called debate, although they really didn't debate much of anything. You can attack the flaws of the other candidates, whether that's Mayor Bloomberg, who's now trying to buy his candidacy, the guy that banned soda in New York, and you can contrast him with Rudy Giuliani, who really turned around New York City by getting rid of the terrible crime problem that they had up until he came into office. And of course, there's so much to talk about with Elizabeth Warren lying about being an American Indian to get into Harvard, and this is just one example of the elite not playing by the same rules they want to have for everybody else. Or whatever candidate your family member doesn't like. Again, don't attack their own candidate head on. It's probably not going to be the nominee anyway. Someone's going to be wrong here. And of course, you can always attack the media. I would say whenever someone is attacking Donald Trump, it's an opportunity to turn that around on the media. And especially the impeachment, the coup attempt that the impeachment is. That this is something that nobody can deny. They've had it out for him from day one, from the day that he even announced his candidacy for president. The media, categorically, even the conservative media, he could not be the nominee. They told us he cannot be the nominee. And I used to work for Ron Paul, and I've often said to people, one of the first signs that got me into supporting Trump is I could see the media were attacking him the same way they were trying to take down his Ron Paul and then later on Rand Paul. And the Democrats can see this in their own race with the media doing the same job on Tulsi Gabbard, who's, of course, the anti-war candidate, the true anti-war candidate in the field today. Much as back in the days when in 2008, the Democrat anti-war candidates were Mike Gravel, who you probably haven't heard of, and Dennis Kucinich, who you probably haven't heard of. Barack Obama gave it minimal lip service. He was never an anti-war candidate. And same thing right now with Elizabeth Warren and Bernie. The true anti-war candidate is Tulsi Gabbard, no question about it. And I think it's good to talk about how the media treats her. And for that matter, although I don't take her seriously as a candidate, but Marianne Williamson is going about attacking the Democrat establishment. And it'll be real interesting to see how things shake up when the Democrat Party establishment, which I think will not tolerate a Sanders or Warren nomination, starts to really go out against them too. So it should be interesting. So I guess that's all I've got for right now. There's so much more we can talk about, but the fact is, you're not going to get a whole lot of opportunity to go into the weeds on these issues anyway. You got to stick to the big stuff. So thinking about the interactions you might have during Christmas time, you have some opportunity now to think, to at least start to feel out, who your family members might be supporting, what their major issues are, so that going into the Christmas season, you can find ways to start by coming from common ground, finding ways that you guys can mutually dislike the mass media, and agree on the things that perhaps you agree with some Democrats on some of the time, and maybe you can get a little bit of rapport from them on some of the things that Trump has done that perhaps they agree with, and more importantly, the things that Democrats are now in lockstep on that a lot of Americans really don't agree with. And I would only conclude by saying, one of the things that really stands out in all of the Democrat debates is a hatred for Donald Trump. And it's not just a hatred for him, it's a hatred for the America that elected him. You see this in the media all the time. When they complain about the popular vote, and that might come up, by the way, too, real quick on the popular vote. Here's a great analogy for you. I was watching a documentary the other day. I was in New England. There was a documentary that came on TV about the Boston Celtics and talking about Larry Bird and that great year that they had when they won the playoffs. And can you imagine if a basketball team lost the playoffs and went out whining, saying, "But we got more points. We got more points." They would be laughed at for being terrible, terrible sports. Because if it's a best of 7 series, the rules of the game are you win by winning the most games. So, yeah, Donald Trump won the electoral vote playing by the rules of the game. It's that simple. So, if they want to say, okay, well, we should change it to a popular vote, Trump has said, bring it on. I would campaign differently under that environment. I wouldn't just campaign in the swing states. That's the way it goes. So, those are just some suggestions. If you have any ideas for anything I missed, leave it in the comments. Hope this video has been helpful to you, and hope you have a wonderful Christmas holiday, and have a good night.